If hard work really made you rich, construction workers, nurses, and factory employees would all be millionaires. But they're not. They're exhausted, underpaid, and stuck in a cycle that was never designed to set them free. You've been lied to your entire life. Hard work isn't the path to wealth. It's the trap that keeps you poor. Think about it. The people who sweat the most, who give their bodies, their time, their entire energy to a job, are often the ones struggling just to survive. Meanwhile, those who work fewer hours, but with leverage, strategy, and clarity, build empires. Something about that picture doesn't add up. And it's not your imagination, it's by design. From the moment you entered school, you were trained to believe a simple formula: study hard, work hard, and one day you'll be rewarded. But here's the truth. The system doesn't reward hard work. It rewards control. It rewards those who understand the game, not those who blindly follow the rules. And the longer you keep grinding without questioning, the more you're feeding a machine that was built to keep you tired, distracted, and broke. That's why so many of you feel trapped. You wake up, rush to work, for hours for money, come home too tired to think, and repeat the cycle the next day. You tell yourself that eventually it will pay off. But years pass. Nothing changes. Your bank account is empty, your body is drained, your dreams are shelved. And still, you keep going, because the system convinced you that working harder is the answer. But let me tell you something no one else will. The harder you work under their rules, the deeper you dig your own grave. Because the habits you've been taught, habits you never even realized you had, are designed to keep you small, designed to keep you obedient, designed to keep you poor. And here's the worst part. You don't even see it happening. You think you're being responsible, disciplined, doing the right thing. But in reality, you're falling into traps set generations ago, traps that keep entire families poor for decades, while a select few reap the rewards of your labor. This video is about ripping the mask off that lie. I'm not here to flatter you. I'm not here to tell you that if you just keep grinding, life will magically get better. I'm here to expose the truth. Hard work alone will never make you rich. In fact, if you don't change the way you think, the way you see money, and the way you use your energy, hard work will guarantee your poverty. So what do you do instead? That's exactly what we're going to uncover. Because wealth has nothing to do with exhaustion. It has nothing to do with clocking in more hours. Wealth is about leverage. It's about clarity. It's about the habits you don't even realize are shaping your destiny every single day. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal the invisible habits that are draining your future right now. The ones you've been programmed to repeat without ever questioning. And I'll show you how to break free from them. Because once you see the truth, you'll never be able to unsee it. You'll realize why your hard work hasn't paid off. You'll realize why the system wants you tired, distracted, and obedient. And you'll realize what you must do instead if you want to stop living paycheck to paycheck and finally start building freedom. This message isn't for the faint of heart. It's not for those looking for comfort. It's for those ready to face reality and do what most people will never dare to do: escape the cycle. Because the truth is simple. You don't need more hours. You don't need more sweat. You don't need to keep killing yourself hoping someone else will reward you. You need to see the traps. You need to break the conditioning. And you need to adopt the mindset and habits that actually build wealth, instead of destroying it. So stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear could change the way you see work forever. And once your eyes are open, nothing will be the same. If you're ready to stop being a pawn in someone else's game, then let's begin. All your life, you've been told a story that sounded noble, even heroic. Work harder than everyone else, and success will eventually be yours. Teachers repeated it, parents reinforced it, and society celebrated it. Movies glorified the underdog who outworks everyone else, sweating and sacrificing until the day the world finally claps for him. But that story, as inspiring as it sounds, was never true. The reality is harsher. The system never wanted you wealthy, it wanted you occupied. And what better way to keep you busy than to convince you that grinding endlessly was the highest virtue? When you are constantly occupied, you stop asking questions. You stop noticing how the game is rigged. You give everything you have, time, energy, life itself, into a cycle that was designed not to set you free, but to keep you running in circles. You don't have to look far to see it. Millions of people work 10 or 12 hours every day. They sacrifice weekends, miss dinners with family, pour themselves into the grind, and yet, after years, they remain stuck. Their wages barely cover their expenses, their debts grow, and their dreams fade into the background. It isn't laziness holding them down. It's the very belief that working harder will somehow lead to a breakthrough. That belief is the prison. Picture the hamster wheel. The animal runs with everything it has, spinning faster and faster. The harder it pushes, the more energy it burns, but at the end of the day, it hasn't moved an inch. That wheel is the life of countless people. Endless motion, endless sacrifice, endless exhaustion, and no progress. And here's the cruel twist. The world praises you for it. Your boss tells you you're reliable. Friends admire your dedication. Strangers nod at your discipline. But admiration doesn't pay the bills. Respect doesn't buy freedom. And the applause you earn for your grind won't change the fact that you are stuck in the same cage. Meanwhile, the people who own the cage live by a completely different rule. They don't measure their worth in hours worked. They don't worship sacrifice. They understand that wealth isn't built on exhaustion. It's built on leverage, on clarity, on creating systems that multiply their efforts. While you're praised for burning out, they're rewarded for stepping back and directing energy where it creates the most value. This is why the promise of just work harder is so destructive. It takes good people, people willing to give, willing to sacrifice, willing to prove themselves, and convinces them that exhaustion is the same as progress. But exhaustion is not progress. It's control. The more drained you are, the less you can see. The less you see, the easier you are to manage. That is the truth nobody wants to admit. The system doesn't thrive because you're lazy. It thrives because you're obedient. Maybe you've already felt it. That quiet frustration that grows when you realize your paycheck hasn't changed, no matter how many extra hours you've added. That ache when you come home too tired to think about anything beyond tomorrow. That small voice that whispers late at night, "I can't keep doing this forever." That voice is not weakness, it's awareness. It's the part of you that knows the promise was false. Because you could keep working this way for the next 20 years and nothing fundamental would change. Your income might rise a little. Your schedule might shift. But the freedom you imagined, the freedom to breathe, to choose, to live on your own terms, will remain out of reach. The harder you work under their rules, the more you guarantee that outcome. This is the myth that holds entire generations hostage. And until you see it clearly, you'll stay trapped. But once you recognize that working harder was never the answer, you unlock the door to something entirely different. Because freedom doesn't come from more hours. It comes from changing the very game you're playing. And to understand that game, you need to see the habits that keep you stuck in it. Habits you've been taught to accept, habits you repeat without noticing, habits that quietly bleed your future dry while you're too tired to resist. Once you recognize them, you'll see exactly why your effort hasn't paid off and how to redirect your energy into something that finally does. One of the greatest traps you were handed without realizing it is the belief that your value can be measured in hours. From the very first job you ever worked, you were trained to think in terms of hourly pay, weekly wages, monthly salaries. The system gave you a neat equation. The more hours you trade, the more money you deserve. And you accepted it because everyone around you did too. But here's the harsh truth. If your value is tied only to hours, you'll always be broke. Think about it. There are only 24 hours in a day. You can't add more. You can't multiply time. And no matter how hard you work, eventually you hit the ceiling. Your body breaks down, your energy fades, your time runs out. The system knows this. It counts on it. By convincing you to sell your hours, it guarantees that you'll never rise above a certain level. You may survive, but you will never escape. Meanwhile, those who build real wealth see the game differently. They don't ask, "How many hours can I work?" They ask, "How can I create value that pays me even when I stop working?" That's why one person spends 12 hours on a construction site and goes home with sore hands and an empty wallet, while another spends 2 hours directing a project, and their wealth multiplies while they sleep. It's not about effort. It's about leverage. And leverage doesn't exist when you measure your life in hours. If you earn only when you're physically present, you're chained to the grind. The moment you stop, the money stops. You could be the most dedicated, most disciplined worker on the planet, and still, one illness, one injury, one missed week would send everything crashing down. That's not wealth. That's dependence dressed up as hard work. The tragedy is that this mindset has been normalized. We call it honest work. We admire the man who puts in overtime. We applaud the woman who takes on double shifts. But what are we really clapping for? Endless exhaustion. A life traded piece by piece for a paycheck that barely covers the cost of existing. You're told to be proud of it, when in reality, it's the very reason you feel trapped. And here's where it becomes dangerous. When you believe hours equal value, you start chasing overtime, chasing side jobs, chasing anything that adds a few more drops of money into a leaking bucket. You convince yourself that if you just work enough hours, eventually the bucket will fill. But the bucket never fills. It empties as fast as you pour into it. And the harder you chase, the more enslaved you become to the cycle. This is why so many people reach their breaking point. They've spent years grinding, thinking discipline alone would set them free, only to discover that their entire identity has been built on selling something that can never scale: their time. The result? Burnout, disappointment, and the quiet realization that no matter how hard they push, they're stuck in the same place. But imagine for a moment if you shifted your perspective. Instead of asking, "How much is my hour worth?" you asked, "What can I create once that pays me over and over?" That single question is the beginning of escape. Because wealth has never been about how much you work. It's about how well you position what you do to keep producing value long after you've stopped. The system doesn't want you to think this way. That's why school never taught you about money, leverage, or ownership. It taught you to be punctual, obedient, and consistent. It conditioned you to believe your worth would always be decided by someone else's clock. And the longer you accept that, the longer you stay trapped in their game. The truth is this: if you don't break free from the idea that hours define your value, you'll spend your life running faster while standing in place. You'll sacrifice your health, your dreams, even your family time, only to look back and wonder why none of it added up to freedom. Because hours don't buy freedom. Hours buy survival. And survival is not the same as living. You don't escape the trap by working harder. You escape by changing the very measure of your worth. When you stop seeing yourself as a seller of time and start seeing yourself as a creator of value, everything shifts. Your energy stops feeding the system and starts building your freedom. And that shift, once made, is impossible to unsee. But here's the painful reality: most people never make it. They cling to the comfort of hourly pay because it feels predictable. They convince themselves that security comes from a guaranteed wage, even if it chains them to a life of struggle. They look at those who step outside the system and say, "That's risky. That's dangerous." But the real danger isn't in taking a risk. The real danger is wasting your entire life working by the hour and never breaking free. And this is only the beginning. Because even if you see through this illusion, even if you understand that selling your hours is a dead end, there are other traps waiting for you. Traps that catch you not in your work, but in the way you spend the little you earn. Invisible leaks that drain your wealth while you're too exhausted to notice. And unless you learn to spot them, you'll keep working harder, feeding the same cycle, never realizing that freedom was slipping away right in front of you. Once you realize that selling hours will never set you free, the question becomes, why does it still feel impossible to get ahead, even when you manage to earn more? The answer lies in the silent leaks, the places where your money disappears before you even notice it's gone. And the most dangerous of these isn't found in taxes or bills. It's hidden in the small choices you make every day, the ones that feel harmless but quietly drain your future. We live in a culture that has mastered the art of profiting from your exhaustion. You come home tired, and there's food waiting to be delivered at the press of a button. You wake up drained, and the coffee shop promises to give you back your energy for a few dollars. You're too worn out to cook, too distracted to plan, so streaming services and shopping apps step in to fill the gap. It feels like comfort. It feels like reward. But it's not comfort, it's conditioning. The little extra you worked so hard to earn is designed to flow right back into the system through instant gratifications that keep you running but never resting. Think of how often it happens. The morning coffee you could make at home, but don't. The takeout meal because cooking feels impossible after a long shift. The new gadget ordered online because scrolling feels easier than pausing to reflect. None of these moments seem significant. You justify them. I worked hard, I deserve this. But that's exactly how the trap works. Every swipe, every click, every indulgence looks like a small choice. But together, they form an invisible chain, one that binds your future while you barely notice. And this is where fatigue becomes the perfect weapon. Because when you're drained, you don't make conscious decisions. You don't invest. You don't strategize. You reach for whatever numbs the moment. And the system profits every time you do. The cycle feeds on itself. The harder you work, the more exhausted you become. The more exhausted you become, the more you spend on convenience. The more you spend, the less you keep. and the less you keep, the harder you must work again. It's a cruel design, because on the surface it feels like freedom. Save time. Make life easier. Reward yourself. But what looks like freedom is actually sedation. You're not buying back your life. You're renting a distraction from the pain of it. And while you're distracted, your future is being sold piece by piece. The real cost isn't the price of the coffee or the delivery fee. It's the pattern you reinforce every time you spend to escape instead of build. Money stops being a tool for freedom and becomes an anesthetic for fatigue. Over years, that habit eats away not only at your finances, but at your ability to believe anything different is possible. You don't even notice how quickly the cycle tightens around you, because it always disguises itself as a treat, a reward, something you deserve. And that's the most dangerous part. Once exhaustion has trained you to spend for comfort, it doesn't stop there. It creeps into how you define yourself. Because if you're already spending to survive the grind, sooner or later you'll start spending to prove you're not just surviving. You'll spend not to meet your needs, but to show the world you're more than the struggle inside. Once exhaustion has conditioned you to spend for comfort, it's only a matter of time before you begin spending for something even more dangerous, the need to prove yourself. Because deep down, every person working endless hours feels the weight of that invisible question. What do I have to show for all this effort? And when the system knows you're asking that question, it knows exactly how to answer, by handing you symbols of success to buy. This is why so many people who work the hardest are the first to chase appearances. The new car that swallows years of wages. The phone that costs a week's worth of work but feels like a badge of progress. The vacation posted online so others can see you living well. None of these things are evil in themselves. But when they become proof that your grind isn't meaningless, they transform into shackles. Because instead of chasing freedom, you start chasing recognition. Instead of building wealth, you build an image. And the image always costs more than you think. Every purchase becomes a statement. Look at me. I'm not falling behind. I'm not invisible. But here's the truth. When you buy to be seen, you pay with the very freedom you claim to be chasing. You tell yourself you're showing strength, but what you're really showing is how deeply the system owns you. Because nothing pleases it more than a worker who exhausts themselves to earn money and then empties it all to maintain appearances. That's not strength. That's obedience dressed up as lifestyle. This is why so many end up feeling hollow even after upgrading their lives. The shiny car feels dull within months. The designer clothes don't silence the anxiety. The expensive dinners are forgotten the moment the bill is paid. Because no matter how much you spend, status is a game that never ends. Someone will always have more. Someone will always outshine you. And as long as your worth is measured by validation, you will always be running, always be chasing, never arriving. And notice how perfectly this serves the system. Because now you're not only working harder to survive, you're working harder to be seen. The weight doubles. Your identity becomes tied to external approval, and every paycheck is swallowed before it even clears the bank. The dream of freedom is replaced by the performance of success. And the more you perform, the further away real success drifts. But here's the part no one tells you. True wealth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't need recognition. The people who quietly build freedom rarely broadcast it, because they don't need to. Their lives speak for them. They rest while others grind. They own while others rent. They choose while others obey. And the reason they can choose is because they refuse to play the game of validation in the first place. Ask yourself, how much of what you own was chosen for freedom, and how much was chosen for approval? How many of your sacrifices are paying for a life you actually want? And how many are paying for the privilege of being seen? These are brutal questions, but they're necessary. Because the moment you admit that your exhaustion has been feeding not just consumption, but performance, you begin to see why all your hard work still hasn't given you peace. The system thrives on that blindness. It tells you that status equals success, and you believe it because the alternative is terrifying. To stop performing means to face the emptiness of years spent grinding without reward. So instead, you buy, you post, you prove, hoping that if others believe you're doing well, maybe one day you'll believe it too. But deep down, you already know the truth. No purchase can buy freedom, and no validation can replace identity. That's the shift most never make. They stay in the cycle of exhaustion and validation, convinced that if they can just maintain the image, the reality will eventually follow. But it never does, because every dollar spent proving something is a dollar stolen from building something. Every hour worked for recognition is an hour not invested in freedom. And until you break that pattern, you will remain stuck in the performance of success, never touching the reality of it. Yet there's another reason this cycle is so seductive. Spending for validation hides an even deeper habit, the one that convinces you that creation itself is too risky, that building something new, stepping outside the grind, daring to take a different path is too uncomfortable to bear. And so instead of facing that discomfort, you settle for the appearance of progress, never realizing that avoiding risk is the greatest risk of all. The reason so many fall into the cycle of appearances is because it feels safer than creating. To buy what others already admire, to perform in ways that are already approved, seems less risky than daring to step into unknown territory. And yet, this avoidance of discomfort is exactly what chains people to a life of endless work without progress. Creation demands something different. It asks you to stop hiding behind the grind and the image and face the terrifying truth. If you want freedom, you must build it. And building isn't comfortable. It requires you to think when you'd rather switch off, to save when you'd rather spend, to take a step when you'd rather stay still. Most people would rather exhaust themselves in familiar routines than confront that discomfort. And that's why they never escape. The system counts on this. It feeds you the idea that discipline means obedience, that showing up every day, doing as you're told, sacrificing your energy for a steady paycheck is noble. It convinces you that stepping outside the pattern is reckless, that investing in yourself is too risky, that experimenting is foolish. And so, you retreat into the safety of predictable exhaustion, while the few who endure discomfort rise above you. Think about it. What feels safer, working overtime for guaranteed pay, or using those same hours to build a skill that might not pay off immediately, but could transform your future? Most people choose the overtime, not because it's smarter, but because it's easier. The discomfort of uncertainty feels unbearable, so they cling to what feels secure, even when that security is an illusion. But freedom has never been born in comfort. Every breakthrough, every leap forward, every story of transformation came from someone who was willing to sit with uncertainty, to tolerate the unknown, to step into creation instead of hiding in repetition. The ones who escape poverty aren't the ones who work the longest hours. They're the ones who dare to endure the awkward, lonely, uncomfortable process of building something of their own. And here lies the paradox. The discomfort you avoid is the very discomfort that would liberate you. The boredom of learning a new skill, the fear of investing your savings, the vulnerability of launching something new, the patience of waiting for it to grow. These are the places where real wealth is born. But if you can't tolerate them, you will keep running back to what feels safe. Overwork, overspending, overcompensating, never realizing that safety was the real danger all along. The system has done everything it can to amplify this fear. It labels risk-takers as irresponsible, dreamers as naive, rebels as failures waiting to happen. And it praises the obedient worker as the responsible adult. But responsibility without freedom is slavery in disguise. What use is being respected for your sacrifice if you never get to live beyond it? What value is there in being admired for your discipline if that discipline only maintains the cage you're trapped in? Look closer at your own life. How many times have you stopped yourself from trying something new because it felt too uncertain? How many opportunities have you delayed because you weren't ready, weren't skilled enough, weren't sure? Every time you walked away, the system won. It kept you inside the cycle, convincing you that discomfort was something to fear instead of something to embrace. The truth is, discomfort is unavoidable. You either face the discomfort of growth, or you live with the discomfort of regret. One hurts now, the other hurts forever. And when you finally understand that, you see why most people remain poor. They've chosen the wrong discomfort. They endure endless fatigue, endless sacrifice, endless struggle, yet avoid the temporary pain of building something new. This avoidance doesn't just cost money. It costs identity. Because every time you choose comfort over creation, you reinforce the belief that you are nothing more than a worker, someone meant to follow rather than lead. And once that identity hardens, breaking free feels impossible. You convince yourself that freedom isn't for people like you, when in reality, freedom was always waiting, on the other side of discomfort. That's the line that separates those who remain trapped from those who escape. Not intelligence, not luck, not even opportunity. It's the willingness to embrace the pain that comes with growth, rather than numbing it with distractions, validation, or endless work. It's the courage to build instead of obey. But notice how perfectly the illusion is maintained. Because just as you begin to sense that you've been avoiding the discomfort that could free you, another voice whispers, "Stay safe. Don't risk it. Protect what little you have." And that voice sounds like reason, but it's fear in disguise. It's the final trick the system plays, convincing you that security is worth more than freedom. And if you believe it, you'll spend your life clutching to the promise of safety, never realizing that the price you pay is everything you ever wanted. That promise of safety is seductive because it sounds like care. Stay here. Keep the steady paycheck. Don't rock the boat. It wraps itself in words like stability, benefits, predictability, things any sane person would want. And yet, underneath the warm language, something colder is happening. Your life gets smaller. You stop asking what you're capable of and start asking only what you can keep. You stop building a future and start guarding a routine. You don't notice the trade at first because the trade is quiet. But over time, the price becomes everything. Security, as you've been sold, is not something you own. It belongs to someone else's decision. A manager's budget, a board's forecast, a policy you never voted on. The economy shifts, and suddenly this safe thing demands more of you for less in return. Hours stretch, wages stall, prices rise, and the promise that once kept you calm now keeps you compliant. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself you're being responsible. But responsibility without agency is just obedience with nicer branding. Notice how quickly safety rearranges your imagination. Opportunities appear, and instead of asking, "What if this works?" you ask, "What if this fails?" You start counting the reasons to wait. You start mistaking caution for wisdom. You start protecting the very pattern that's draining you. The question isn't whether risk exists. It always does. The question is which risk you choose. The risk of building something that might take time, or the risk of never building anything and watching the years close in. Think about the people you've seen hold on to stable jobs for decades. Good people, disciplined people. They did everything right, and when the company changed direction, they were out in a week. The ground disappeared not because they gambled, but because they never learned to stand on their own feet. Safety kept them still long enough for the floor to move beneath them. And when it did, they had nowhere to go because safety had trained them to stop growing. There's a different kind of safety, the kind that doesn't depend on permission. It looks less polished at first. It doesn't come with a neat contract or a tidy calendar. It's built in the dark, in the hours no one pays you for, with skills no one assigned you to learn. It comes from ownership of your craft, your choices, your time. It's the security of options, the kind that grows when you say no to distractions and yes to creation. It's the confidence that if one door closes, you can build another. That kind of safety doesn't ask for guarantees. It is the guarantee. Of course, they'll call you reckless for wanting it. They have to. If you stop equating loyalty with virtue, the old levers stop working. If you stop proving your worth with exhaustion, the old praise stops matching. If you stop buying comfort to numb the grind, the old economy loses a customer. It's easier for the world to paint you as unrealistic than to admit it needs you predictable. So it flatters your fear and shames your courage. It tells you you're responsible when you shrink and naive when you expand. Responsibility, properly understood, is the opposite of shrinking. It's refusing to outsource your future to a paycheck you don't control. It's being the kind of person whose habits create margin, whose discipline creates leverage, whose identity is bigger than any role. Real responsibility is building the capacity to feed your family whether or not a company needs you this quarter. It is learning, saving, investing, shipping, iterating, behaviors that look risky to those who equate safety with staying put, but look obvious to anyone who has ever survived a storm. Stability is not evil, but the worship of stability will cost you your life. Comfort can be a blessing. Make it your master, and it becomes a cage with velvet walls. Routine can keep you steady. Cling to it in fear, and it will keep you small. The same structure that helps you recover can also keep you from moving. The difference is intention. Are you using it to build, or is it using you to stall? You already know this. You feel it when Sunday evening turns into a quiet knot in your chest. You feel it when the raise arrives and nothing changes except the bill you're now willing to tolerate. You feel it when the idea returns, the one you keep postponing because it isn't the right time, while the right time keeps passing you by. Safety keeps asking you to wait. Freedom keeps asking you to begin. There's a moment in every life where the math becomes undeniable. The cost of staying becomes higher than the cost of starting. The fear of the unknown is still there, but the fear of a known, shrinking future is bigger. That's the moment people call courage from the outside. From the inside, it feels like clarity. You stop bargaining with the cage. You stop treating your exhaustion like a virtue. You stop auditioning for approval. You decide to build. And building doesn't mean burning everything down tomorrow. It means bending the arc today. It means turning hours you use to sell into hours you invest. It means trading a portion of comfort for competence, a portion of predictability for progress. It means replacing the performance of success with the practice of it, learning relentlessly, making something useful, saving more than you spend, placing small bets that compound, protecting your focus like it's oxygen. You don't run from risk, you allocate it. The hardest part isn't skill. It isn't even strategy. It's identity. As long as you see yourself as someone who survives by staying safe, you will sabotage the very moves that would make you safe for real. When you begin to see yourself as someone who creates, who adapts, who takes responsibility for outcomes, your behavior changes to match. Discipline stops being what keeps you in place and becomes what sets you free. So when that familiar voice whispers to hold tight to what little you have, hear it for what it is. Not protection, but limitation. Safety that demands your future in exchange for a quiet present is not safety. It's a slow surrender. The alternative isn't recklessness. It's deliberate courage, choosing the discomfort that builds you over the comfort that buries you. And the moment you choose it, the ground beneath you stops feeling like a trap and starts feeling like a foundation. When you start to see through the illusions, hours sold as value, distractions packaged as comfort, validation disguised as success, and security framed as responsibility, something shifts. The fog clears. You realize that all along, you weren't failing because you weren't working hard enough. You were failing because you were playing a game designed for you to lose. And in that realization lies the beginning of freedom. The question, then, is obvious. If hard work is keeping you poor, what do you do instead? The answer isn't to stop working. Work is essential. Effort matters. But the effort has to move in a direction that multiplies, not drains. It has to be planted, not wasted. And that begins with the decision to stop selling yourself in pieces and start building yourself in whole. Think of it this way. Every hour you've been trading for survival could become an hour you invest in creation. Instead of measuring life by wages, measure it by leverage. Ask not, how much am I paid for this hour? But what can this hour create that will keep paying me long after it's over? That single shift in thinking separates those who stay trapped from those who begin to climb out. And once you begin to climb, you have to protect your energy from the leaks designed to pull you back down. That means cutting the link between exhaustion and consumption. Stop using money to numb yourself. Start using it to free yourself. If you feel the impulse to spend because you're tired, pause and ask, is this purchase buying back my future, or is it stealing it? Over time, those choices compound, not in what you buy, but in who you become. Freedom grows when you stop feeding the need to be seen. You don't have to prove anything with possessions or appearances. True wealth whispers, it doesn't scream. It shows itself in options, in space to breathe, in time reclaimed. Every dollar not spent on validation is a dollar redirected to building leverage. Every moment not wasted proving yourself is a moment invested in creating yourself. And creation itself, the step most avoid, is where the real transformation begins. Build the skill you've been postponing. Start the project you've been afraid to begin. Put your money into something that grows instead of something that disappears. Yes, it feels uncomfortable. Yes, it feels uncertain. But discomfort is the soil of freedom, and nothing worth having grows without it. The same goes for security. Stop clinging to safety that isn't real. Stability offered by someone else is a leash, not a foundation. The only security you'll ever truly have is the one you build. Savings that buy you time, skills that no one can take away, systems that keep producing whether you show up or not. That kind of security looks fragile from the outside, but from the inside it's unshakable because it doesn't depend on permission. And all of this comes down to one principle: responsibility. Not the version you were taught, obedience to a paycheck, loyalty to a grind, but the real kind. Responsibility as in owning your direction, shaping your habits, refusing to outsource your future. It means discipline, yes, but discipline aimed at freedom, not performance. It means saying no to what numbs you and yes to what builds you, even when no one claps for it. especially when no one claps for it. The truth is, most people will never make these shifts. They'll keep running in circles, clinging to illusions, numbing their fatigue, proving themselves with purchases, begging safety to protect them. But a few, maybe you, will hear this and feel the sting of recognition. And instead of turning away, you'll act. You'll stop being a pawn in someone else's design and start being the architect of your own. So what should you do instead? Work? Yes, but work with intention. Use your hours to build assets, not just wages. Spend less on distraction and more on creation. Seek freedom over validation, growth over comfort, ownership over safety. Every small decision in that direction compounds, until one day you look up and realize you've broken the cycle that held you for so long. If you felt that something was wrong, you weren't imagining it. If you've wondered why your effort never matched your results, you weren't crazy. The system was built to keep you poor, but the way out has always been there, waiting for you to take it. It doesn't start with